Here we are again, Christine, talking about Eros today. When I say the word Eros, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think the immediate response is Eros, erotic energy, excitement,
Hmm.
and then the learned response, which is that I know that it's also so much more than that.
Yeah, yeah. What else? What else is it other than the excitement and erotic energy for you?
Yeah, well, I wrote that note, which I sent to you, my thoughts on what
Yes.
Eros is. See if I can find that again here. Um, Eros is the creative spark. It's the animating force of the universe. And I love that word animating because it's aliveness, it's motion, it's movement, it's animals, it's us, it's bringing something from nothing into everything.
Hmm.
It's life.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, Eros is the force that sparks that.
Hmm.
And as humans, we get to experience that in our bodies, this divine feeling that I think created the energy, that created the cosmos, that created the planet, that created everything that's also in us. And I know it as a feeling of excitement that motivates me to surpass my inhibitions, my normal limitations, or things, places where I might stop myself. When I feel arrows, I'm bigger than that and I can do more. I have more energy. I have more delight in the unknown.
Mm.
So rather than fearing what I don't know, or maybe in addition to fearing what I don't know, I'm also excited for what I might discover. It's like a anticipation of amazing surprises and pleasure.
Yeah. I love that element you introduced there right toward the end when you said it. I'll paraphrase. I won't be able to quote it, but it draws me into places I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
surprise. I heard surprise.
Yeah. And in going to places I don't know, I also get to meet parts of myself that I haven't met yet.
Mm. What's the value of that to you?
Mm. Well, it's expansion and it's freedom.
Mm.
I am more than I thought I was. I have the ability to surprise myself, which, if you think about it, is like mind blowing.
Yeah. To surprise yourself is mind blowing.
I
Yeah.
mean, who needs drugs? Who needs alcohol? Who needs all of these? I feel like for me, Eros, like, who needs coping mechanisms when you have the ability to surprise yourself?
I love that sentence. Who needs coping mechanisms when you have the ability to surprise yourself? I love that.
Mm.
Yeah. Expansion and freedom, too. I noticed those words.
Mm.
Expansion and freedom. Eros not just animates the cosmos, but animates you toward your own expansion and your own freedom.
Mm.
Mm, beautiful.
Mm.
Mm.
Right. Yeah, the image that I get is that, if I'm thinking of myself as an energetic being, I can sort of have this cool, maybe monochromatic, kind of tightly contained sort of energetic streak. Or I can have this changeable, multicolored, moving, exploring, discovering, kind of boundless streak of energy that dances with other streaks of energy. And Eros, for me, it lights that up.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, you said it so beautifully. Let me come at this and dance with you on this.
Yeah.
Although that last thing, it reminded me of ecstatic dance.
Mm.
It's if you had just taken that last sentence you said out of context, and someone said, Christine said this the other day. What do you suppose she's describing? I would say, oh, she and I both go to the same ecstatic dance place in Durham, and that's my experience exactly.
Mm.
I think it's why I go. Because I get to tap into this animating force of the universe that lives within me as me. And I get to express that in and with my body with 30 or 40 or more other souls in that same energy or in a similar energy, but each unique.
Mm-hmm.
But also the last time I was there, I saw you. I was lost in a swirl of Eros.
Mm.
And I was not dancing, with the exception of a couple of moments. I wasn't dancing with anyone individually. There were a couple of moments where, like, one guy and I kind of picked up each other's rhythm and we mirrored each other for a while. But for the most part, that entire hour and a half, I felt as though I were dancing with the energy field of 40 souls.
Mm.
And it was about as alive a moment as I've ever known. It was just gorgeous and delicious, I would say.
Mm.
Eros, for me, has all that you said. Every word you said resonated with my experience of Eros in my life. And in addition, I would say there's a piece about it. There's a word that kept coming up as I kept listening to you. Allurement.
Mm.
If we live in an erotic universe, one of the qualities of this universe, it seems to me, is allurement. I mean, if you think, and it's all the way up and all the way down. If you think about the behavior of subatomic particles, they seem to be allured to each other. This quark gets together with that quark, or I don't know how I'm not a physicist, but they get together, they're allured to each other. They kind of sniff each other out, and they essentially let's make an electron or a proton or a neutron. And it's allurement. And then that next level up, these subatomic particles get together in a particular configuration and they make an atom.
Mm.
And then a few atoms get together and they kind of allured to each other and they make a molecule. And all the way up. And then now we're talking about galaxies that are dancing with each other. Galaxies allured to each other. I saw an image on the internet the other day of two entire galaxies that had been pulled into each other and had intersected. So they looked like this.
Wow.
Galaxies feel the allurement of Eros. It's breathtaking. And that's no different than the energy of ecstatic dance in Durham on a Sunday. For me.
So when you said you were dancing in a swirl of Eros, what was that experience like for you? What did it feel like?
Oh boy, it was magic. I felt like I wasn't dancing with 40 bodies. I felt I was dancing with an organism of energy. And I would feel into the energy of, like, if we were to describe it in terms of bodies, there would be a pocket of 3 or 4 people who had found a certain energy together, and they were kind of in a particular rhythm. And then I would move past them and feel that energy move into my body, and I would allow it. There was a big allowing. And I would allow my body to be moved by the energy field. I would move through, and then another energy field, maybe 4 or 5 feet away, with 2 or 3 other dancers, was going on. And then I was allured into kind of, well, what would happen if I go between these 2 pockets of energy and feel the intersection in my body? And what would that do if I allowed my body to flow with that? So it felt like it wasn't my body dancing with 40 other bodies in this kind of separate self way. It felt like a swirling energy field of which I was just part of the energy field. And it was really a beautiful experience. Yeah.
So, in that experience, the Eros is curiosity and an openness.
Yes, and vulnerability, allowing well, you and I have slightly different backgrounds in core energetics, but in where I studied, a thing that came up a lot was allow yourself to be impacted by the other. And so there's a kind of a softness and an allowing and a receiving and a vulnerability to allow myself to be, my energy field to be impacted by the energy field of the other energy fields in the room. So it's not unlike what I imagine if we could somehow get a window into the interior experience of these allegedly inanimate objects like quarks and bosons and mesons. And what's it like to be them? It's like, without words, this inner experience of being drawn by another energy field and impacted and changed.
Or even animals.
Yeah.
I remember one time wondering, how does a slug know where to go?
Yeah.
And my friend Shayla, who actually hates slugs, said they just follow their pleasure. They just go where it feels good, where they're drawn to go. That's how they move. And I think about other animals like squirrels who are always running around and doing things and digging and playing. And even domestic animals, sometimes I think, well, we have so many things to distract ourselves with. We have so many things to occupy ourselves with. But these animals don't. So how are they not just bored all the time? How are they not just dying of boredom? But I feel like animals maybe live in a state of Eros.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the natural state of nature. I think as I look out the window past my computer here, I see a whole complex forest filled with plants and animals and fungi, and they're all in some way in communication. It's like the entire thing is a communicating, internally and externally communicating organism that we at some point in our development were not separate from. And somewhere along the way, our species started to get the idea that we were in fact separate from that communicating, swirling energy. And there were some gains to be made with that sensibility, and we lost a lot, it seems to me. I think that really is at least part of what the story of the myth of the Garden of Eden is pointing to. It's really the fall from relationship with our place in nature, our place in the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think our ancient ancestors had a deeper understanding of that we are part of this broader system than the 21st century human does. We are, and there are a zillion reasons for that we could point to, but however we got here, we're here. There are people who, there are millions, hundreds of millions, and maybe billions of people who have not taken a walk in nature in their lives and are afraid of it, alienated from it. And yet it's our home. We are of nature, but we don't admit to it. And so when we cut ourselves off from that, we cut ourselves off from Eros. But it's not just Eros out there. I think we're cutting ourselves off from our own Eros. And you referenced, you don't need to, I'll paraphrase again, self-medicate.
Mm-hmm.
If you can, why would you do that if you can surprise yourself?
Yeah.
But I think the reason we do that in unprecedented numbers is because we are cut off from our own erotic energy. And it's I've always been amused, or long been amused, that another word for liquor is spirits. I mean, I think we're thirsting for spirit or Eros. I think spirit is sometimes a synonym or close to a synonym for Eros. We're thirsting for it, but we're so cut off from our own erotic energy, we don't know how to get to it. And so we look for it elsewhere. We look for it in sexuality. We look for it in substances. We look for it in distractions. We look for it in a million places when really it's everywhere. It's everywhere and we can't see it.
Yeah, there's two things this is making me think of. I was listening to a woman speak who works with bonobos. Bonobos are, we share 98% of the same DNA as them. They're really intelligent, but they're kind of infamous for sexually stimulating themselves and each other. She has gotten to know them really well over the decades that she spent time with them. And she said that we have things that they don't have, and they have things that we lost. And she wishes that we could keep all the things that we've created for ourselves and get back the things that they have that we've forgotten, because then we could be whole.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's that force that you're talking about, that sense of connectedness and oneness. And it feels to me also like a form of communication, like a deep, I don't know if telepathic is quite the word, but it's a communication without words. Like a dance.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you made me think of, the first time I studied Eros in my training, I was reading the Pathwork lecture, the channeled lectures. This one was on sex, love, and Eros, and the braid of sex, love, and Eros. And there's a lot to talk about there, but what stood out to me and what has really stuck with me from that was this question that someone asked about how do you maintain Eros in a long-term relationship, because Eros tends to fade. It's there at the beginning, it gives us courage, and then over time it diminishes typically.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you sustain it over a longer period of time? And the answer was to remember that we never know all there is to know about another person.
Mm-hmm.
We can never know all there is to know about ourselves. And we know that because we've been studying ourselves, looking at ourselves, exploring ourselves for, well, me for many years and you probably for decades. And there's always more to discover.
Right.
So if we can never know everything there is to know about ourselves, how could we ever think that we could know everything there is to know about somebody else?
Right.
And so if we remain open to the possibility, to the reality of being able to be surprised by someone, by something, by ourselves, then we can continue to feel that Eros again and again and again.
Right.
And I think it starts with feeling that in ourselves. Not forgetting that, oh, there's more to discover in here.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more to play with and explore and feel and be.
And one of the reasons I think that it will always be true is rooted in the fact that we live in an evolutionary universe and we ourselves are participants in the evolution of the cosmos. And so if we and the cosmos are evolutionary, that means that even if by some miracle, and it would take a beyond possible miracle, even if I could know everything there is to know about myself today, that would be incomplete knowledge tomorrow, because tomorrow I will not be who I am today. And so and we can say that about our partners. We can say that about our friends, our workmates, our everybody on the planet, every being on the planet. We're all engaged, whether we're aware of it or not, in this evolutionary process. So we actually cannot know, no matter how much information we gather, everything that there is to know. I was reflecting earlier today on my parents, who were in love for 72 years and married for 70, and died within a few weeks of each other, about 12 years ago. And they were constantly finding out about each other. I mean, you might think, if you didn't understand humans as evolutionary beings, you might think that they would have figured everything out by the 20th year, let's say. But that's not how they experienced it at all. And I had a front row seat as their youngest child, and my mother at 91, just before she died, was a very different person than she was even at 89. So how could she be fully known? How could we know each other? How could we know ourselves fully? Because we're constantly in process. Even the most stuck human on the planet is evolving, no matter how much they resist it.
And we could say that about
even if it
God.
doesn't look right.
But are you the one who told me? Somebody mentioned that to me recently. The concept of an evolving God.
Yeah. When I encountered quite a number of years ago the notion that God's self is an evolutionary process,
Right.
it opened my whole theology up. It's like, oh, So as I evolve myself, and to the extent I'm conscious about that, I'm consciously participating in the evolution of God. Well, how cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
How exciting is that? How
Yeah.
surprising might that be, moment to moment? Well, for me, it's quite a thrill to take on that worldview, that cosmic view, that we are evolutionary beings participating consciously or unconsciously in the evolution of an evolutionary universe and an evolutionary God. So this is a wonderful conversation, but I want to ask this question: why should anyone care about what we've just said? Why should we care that that is so?
Mm.
Why is that worldview worth exploring to you? What possibilities, maybe a better way of asking that is, what possibilities does viewing yourself as an erotically powered, energetic process, evolutionary process, and the whole cosmos as that same thing, how does that change your day to day?
Well, we're here to live. I always go back to the feelings in my body. I always think about, for me, it wasn't that long ago that I didn't feel connected to Eros. I didn't have a lot of joy in my body or in my experience of being alive. So I can remember not wanting to get out of bed in the morning. I can remember hitting the snooze button again and again and again. And as soon as I wake up, sleep was like a break. And then as soon as I woke up, I'd have maybe just a moment where there's nothing. And then this rush would come into my brain of just, I don't know, dread, stress.
It's funny you would say that as the first, as you, in that moment of pause, as you were thinking about the rush of, the word that came to mind was dread.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be disconnected from Eros is, for both of us, to wake up to dread, a dreadful experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. But go on, please. I just wanted to pause there because that just grabbed me. I was just thinking that,
Thank you. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and with that came two things that were so intense they were almost unfeelable for me, which was a longing for purpose and a longing for connection. And I felt like I couldn't find either. And when I would be with people, I would get moments of connection or glimpses of connection, but then other times where I would become ungrounded or too much in my head, or I would start worrying about what they wanted, who they wanted me to be, and I would try to be that. And so in this process of connecting with Eros, I think it was a combined process of grounding, feeling safer in myself and in my body, and then finding that spark inside of me that now allows me to walk into a room like the ecstatic dance room with 30 or 40 other bodies and souls in that room and feel excited and curious about how I'm going to show up. And about the
Right.
fact that I get to be me here today, whatever that means, however that looks. And that's going to be interesting. And that's going to be exciting. And that feeling, I mean, it's changed everything.
Yeah.
So I wake up now and I get out of bed and I'm happy to be awake. I'm excited. I'm actually excited for my day. I never thought back in those times that would be possible. I just couldn't imagine how I could ever feel that way. But I do.
Sometimes when the Eros is flowing in me, well, when the Eros isn't flowing in me, life's travails will sometimes get me up in the middle of the night, and I'll be up for 2 hours filled with the D word, dread. You know, just kind of, oh God, how am I going to resolve this? That kind of energy. What am I going to do about this? Ugh. When I'm completely in the connection to my own erotic energy, I might wake up in the middle of the night and be up for 2 hours, but it's a very different experience. It's like, well, while I'm up, let me do some writing, or learn something, or who knows. But I can't go back to sleep, but it's because I'm excited about being Ronen.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, as opposed at the other end of the spectrum, I have known what it is to wake up in the middle of the night and say, I wish this would just be over. Not an honest to God suicidal ideation, but just, the John Mayer song, Stop This Train. I just, oh, please, just stop. I just want this to stop. And when I'm in erotic energy, it's like, wow, where are we going?
Right.
What could be next? You're back to your notion about the possibility of being surprised by myself and what's arising around me. And
Yeah. And what's coming up for me as you're sharing this is that other piece about purpose. I've thought, even up until this conversation, purpose is doing something. My purpose is helping the world or helping people in this way, or even, let's say, evolving the world or evolving myself in this way, or some kind of notion of doing. As you're speaking, what's coming through to me is to really, actually, my purpose is being me. That's it.
Yeah.
My purpose is just to be me.
Right. Isn't it a marvelous view that actually might be more than enough for a life purpose? The exploration of what it is to be this human for this whatever period of time I've got, and to go through whatever evolutionary processes I'm going to go through, which I cannot predict. I think one of the things that is occurring to me now is that there's an aliveness, and you used aliveness right at the beginning when you were describing what Eros is. There's an aliveness to uncertainty.
Yeah.
And thus the surprise. If I am certain about the way things are going to play out, then it's death. I mean, it has the energy of death. It has the energy of a machine. Tick tock, chick chick chick. It's a this, therefore that kind of universe. It's a machine clockwork universe that we live in. Charlie Chaplin, in one of his wonderful movies, a commentary on the modern industrial worker and how dehumanizing it is, shows this poor soul that is trapped by the machine world that he has become. And there's a kind of a feeling of death in that.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're talking about here feels like the forest across the street from me. It's like, we don't know. Hell,
Right.
we had a lightning bolt 2 weeks ago strike a tree on our land. And what a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
If I knew exactly what was going to go on with this forest, then that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Because the odds of a lightning bolt striking that tree are minuscule. But we
Mm-hmm.
got to be surprised by that and the fallout from that. I heard it. It was like 50 yards from here. It was breathtaking. And we were surprised by the
Mm-hmm.
proximity and the explosion. And then we went and looked at it and were surprised by that. And the universe becomes unmechanical, surprising, evolutionary. As soon as we take off our machine glasses and
Right.
put on the glasses of we live in an erotic evolutionary cosmos, and we are active participants in that.
For sure. And it takes courage, of course, because it's not all about pleasure. It's also about taking the risk to experience pain and fear and anger. And yet, even in those experiences, there is the sense of pleasure and Eros. I mean, I won't go into this deeply, but in the couples work I've been doing with my partner, we could maintain a status quo that would be pretty even keel for a while, maybe for a lifetime. But it's dead.
Yeah.
It feels dead. It's false safety. But when we come into the work with the willingness to show each other the parts of ourselves that we've been afraid to show, we risk each other's anger, each other's pain, our own anger, our own pain, possibly losing the relationship. At least that's what the fear is. But so far, every time we've done it, gone into the unknown, let ourselves be seen in a new way, in a fuller, truer way, we end up feeling more connected and more alive.
Mm-hmm.
And you said earlier, what if, or isn't, because it's true that to just being me is more than purpose enough. And I feel like, yes, because if we all did that, it would be revolutionary.
Oh, yeah.
Evolutionary, revolutionary.
Yeah. The one word I haven't, if we've said it, I've missed it. But I want to just drop it in like a new chemical in this, or new spice in the soup. I hear my partner cooking dinner in the background, so I'm thinking food. Just drop a new flavor in there. Possibility. In an erotic world, possibility is always available.
Mm.
In a certain world, in a machine world, in an unerotic world, possibility gets shut down. You might have a situation present that in this moment, through a non-erotic view of the situation, looks like, well, that's happened, and therefore this and this and this will happen, and therefore this is the outcome, and we're doomed. I've had that in business. I've had that in relationship. But if I stay connected to Eros, there's always possibility. Not every situation can be saved. I'm not saying that. That would be naive and magical thinking. But I am saying that an erotic world is a world with possibility. A non-erotic world has no possibility.
Right. And that possibility might look like, taking the relationship example, there are possibilities that we can't see. I mean, we just can't see every single possibility. How could we?
Right.
And yeah, not every situation can be saved. Maybe a relationship would have to end, but maybe an unseeable possibility is an ending that actually feels what's the word? True and loving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An ending that feels sad, but also hopeful, also right, also an act of love, an act of growth.
Right. And even in the endings, there are possibilities. I can't think of a relationship ending that didn't birth something new and very often wonderful. And a couple of my very dearest friends were married for a few years, got divorced, remarried, and they're a couple of years older than I am. They are still erotic and married and joyful and exploring their evolutionary relationship, even post ending. So, and they're both completely in touch with their erotic energy. They're masters of Eros. They have surrendered their lives to Eros and possibility. And they have done things that they and nobody in their families or among their friends could see possible. But you just divorced him, or he just divorced you, or she just divorced you, whatever it was. Yeah, but I love him and we've got a possibility here. And then 40 years later, they're together still.
Yeah, I love that. I think that a lot of times we talk about Eros as something that's experienced at the beginning. It spurs us to action. It allows us to be bold enough to send a text message to somebody that we might have been afraid to message. It sparks things, starts things. The truth is that there are opportunities for Eros at every stage: beginning, middle, end. Beginning, middle, end. Because each of those stages presents us with a new set of possible experiences. Beginning is unique and special. A middle is unique and special and beautiful. And an ending is unique and special and can be so beautiful.
Yeah. And this is why we've come up with our new retreat, because this is really like we've run a couple of retreats together before, but they didn't have this in it. And I think just for our viewers' sake, I'm like, why are we talking about this? Because I think it's fair to say, and correct me if you have a different view of it, or add to it if you have a different view. I think what we are realizing as we look back on the work we've done together in retreat space, we both came to the realization that while we might call it this or call it that, what we're really up to, what these retreats are really about, is freeing up the erotic energy that has been forgotten or trapped or stuck through an infinite array of processes and interactions that are possible in a retreat. These are not tightly scripted retreats by any means, because how could a retreat about exploring Eros be scripted, given what we've just said about what we think about Eros? How could you script that retreat? Like, think about that last retreat we led a couple of months ago. How could we even script that? We came in. I'm still marveled at that last one-day retreat we held in Apex. That, I mean, I look at my notes and there's nothing there. We have this very, very. We'll do this. We'll set the container with these processes, and then this whole big blank space that we left open. I think appropriately so. For let's see what happens. We know what gifts each of us bring, and we know what gifts we as a leadership team bring. I think we're getting to know that. And even those are evolving. And we're surprising ourselves, I think. I continue to surprise myself. I suspect it's true for you as well. It's like, oh, that's possible here. And it's not just individually. It's like, what does the Christine and Ronen team offer? Well, that's evolving too, certainly. So these one-day retreats that we're planning for in the coming weeks and months are simply opportunities to open ourselves to the Eros that's already in the room and cannot help but be in the room because it's universal.
Yeah.
And in everybody who walks through the door. Bring it.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Excited.
Well, this has been fun. This has been fun. I so love talking about this subject with you. I'm sure we'll do it again. So thank you so much for this conversation. The conversation alone kind of juices me up. Now I'm going to take this to enjoying the dinner I hear being prepared. I'm very excited about being.
Yeah, joy.